Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back to Premier League Dad. It's the January transfer window coming up in just a few days' time, and it's shaping up to be a really, really important one for a number of clubs. So with that in mind, I've taken a look at the key areas that each team needs to strengthen in and one or two players that they should be focusing on. Let's take a look. So first up, working alphabetically, let's take a look at Arsenal. Bukayo Saka, obviously the big news coming out of Arsenal over the last few days, that it looks like a bad one. It looks like he's going to be out for some months. And you never know with players coming back from big injuries like that, how it might affect their form. You know, I only see the best of Bukayo Saka next season now. And there's lots of rumours about Mohamed Kudus and various others to help them get through that period. So it wouldn't surprise me if they looked for a wide player. However, I don't think that's what they need. I think there's an area of Arsenal's team that has been lacking. You know, when you look at great Premier League winning sides, for example, which is exactly what Arsenal are seeking to be, they've always got a very strong centre forward. They've always got a goal scorer. And, you know, they've got Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz hasn't been terrible. He's been an all right player for Arsenal, and he's contributed much better in the last 12 months. But is he going to be a striker that can lead the line and lead them to Champions Leagues, to Premier Leagues? I'm not sure he is. Gabriel Jesus has come on recently and you know, had a bit of a purple patch. But again, he's not someone that Arsenal fans have got a lot of faith in. Very clever player, good poacher, good finisher, but I'm not sure he's the one either. So I think there's a gap in the Arsenal side. They've targeted Benjamin Sesko in the past from Leipzig. Again, very good player, but I'm not sure he comes into this Arsenal side and immediately makes them better. He's probably one that takes a year or two to grow into that role. Now, there's very few players that could come in and immediately improve Arsenal. But one player that I think could is Jonathan David at Lille. Now, Jonathan David is he's available on a relatively cheap deal because apparently his contract ends this summer. Lille still trying to retain him. He's 24. He's scored very consistently, big numbers in Ligue 1 for several years now. And I think he's ready for a big move, but he can run the channels. He's got bags of pace, really good finisher. And I think whatever stock you place on Ligue 1, you know, it gets a bit of a bad rep sometimes, but I think Jonathan David could be a very good Premier League player. And he's young enough that he can come in and grow and not necessarily, you know, be the finished product right now. But he's old enough and mature enough that he's played enough games at Champions League level. He's played at a good level in France that he can come in and immediately contribute. So I think Jonathan David is one that Arsenal would be remiss not to be looking at in this window. So next up, Aston Villa had a phenomenal season last year under Unai Emery, of course, qualified for the Champions League and flying high in Europe this year too. But they're just stuttering a little bit in the league, aren't they? They're just stuttering a little bit in the league. And I would say a big reason for that is the lack of width in Unai Emery's system. Now, I know in Unai Emery's system, typically the fullbacks push on and you know, Dean and Cash gives them quite a lot of width, but they play with effectively 5 central midfielders. You know, John McGinn on the right-hand side, Morgan Rogers, who's been terrific, on the left, Tielemans in that sort of number 10, and then Onana and Kamara sitting in front of the defence. But they've not had a proper wide forward since they sold Moussa Diaby, and I think it's an area that they could look at. Obviously, they've got Leon Bailey out there, but he hasn't really done enough, I think, in a Villa shirt to cement a first team place. And there's one player that I absolutely adore in the Premier League that I think is tailor-made for Aston Villa. He's someone I would have loved at Liverpool, to be honest. I'd still love at Liverpool. It's Bryan Mbeumo from Brentford. Phenomenal player. Really, really good player. Good, you know, fast, can go in behind. Creates a lot. He works really well with Johan Wissa this season. He worked really well with Ivan Toney last season. You know, positionally, he's very good. He tracks back and defends really well. Very, very strong on the ball. And just a really clever, creative player that can score goals as well. And I think Mbeumo would be a fantastic acquisition for Aston Villa. He's one that you would look at and go, that's going to push Aston Villa on. Now, on another note, I mean, how much do we think Bryan Mbeumo goes for in this transfer window? Brentford fans, how much would it be to let him go? Your prized asset. Obviously, you let Ivan Toney go for 40 million when he had, limited time left on his contract. Is that the sort of figure we'd be looking at for Bryan Mbeumo? Would it be more? I think around 40 to 50 million is about right for Mbeumo. I think that's probably what Villa could acquire him for. What do you think? Let me know. Next up, Bournemouth, who are a point behind Manchester City going into the new year. You'd never have said that, would you? Flying high, doing really, really well under Andoni Iraola, and a really, really good side to watch. And a big part of that is the form of Milos Kerkez, their left-back, who is attracting lots of interest and may well feature in this video later on. I think they're probably going to need a full-back either this month or very, very soon, but I certainly think that Bournemouth are going to need a full-back. And there's a couple of players that I think would be available on a relatively low-cost deal. So first up, Ben Chilwell from Chelsea. Now, obviously, he's had his injury issues, but when he's fit, Ben Chilwell, very, very good, reliable player. I think Bournemouth could snag a deal there and say to Chelsea, look, we'll take him, but we're not paying too much of a fee. And Chelsea would probably see that as a win. So I think Chilwell would be a really good acquisition for Bournemouth. The other one that arguably would be better than Chilwell, Alfie Doughty from Luton. Now, Doughty was great when he played for Luton in the Premier League. He's just off the back of a pretty bad injury. He's had I think a couple of months out, but when he's played for Luton this season, he's done really, really well. He's still only 25, still a young lad. He can play forward as well. He can play up further up in midfield. High energy, scores, can assist as well. Probably going to be available given that Luton are unlikely to be coming back up this year based on where they are in the Championship. They've had a terrible year since going down, and I fully expect someone to take advantage of that sooner rather than later. I think Alfie Doughty is a Premier League player, definitely. So it'll be interesting to see if Bournemouth could get that one done. But yeah, I think on the left-hand side, if Kerkez moves on as expected, Doughty, Chilwell, they're the two I would look at. So next up, Brentford. Thomas Frank's side have been a bit Jekyll and Hyde, haven't they? Fantastic at home. Obviously, only Forest have beat them at home. I think they've got the second best home record after Liverpool, but dreadful away from home. I don't think they've picked up a win away from home. They weren't great midweek against Brighton. Obviously, they got a point. I think their away form being so poor points to sort of a soft underbelly, especially in midfield, and I think that's the key area we need to look at with Brentford. They know some energy, some legs, someone who's a bit more agile in there, alongside someone like Norgard, for example. And there's a couple of players that I've picked out. First one is Lewis Ferguson from Bologna. Now, Lewis Ferguson's a player that I've watched going back to the SPL. A very, very talented player. He's a little bit like John McGinn in the sense of he can get around the pitch. He can create as well. He can play a little bit further forward in the 10. But he can also sit back. He's very composed and good on the ball. So Lewis Ferguson would be one I would look at. How much that would cost to get him out of Bologna, I'm not sure. But I'm sure he's ready for a Premier League move. Now, obviously, Bologna played in the Champions League this season. Not doing so well in Serie A, so probably unlikely to qualify again. Might see this as an opportunity to kind of boost his profile and come to the Premier League. So he would be one I would look at. The only other one that I think for Brentford, it's a player coming onto the radar of a lot of clubs now, not just Brentford. He's been linked with Spurs as well, is Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis. Now, Cardoso's a US international. He's not long joined Real Betis, actually. A very, very good player. Very composed, sort of imperious midfielder. Good at sitting in front of the back foot. I think he would be exactly what you need alongside someone like Norgard. And he's a Premier League player for sure. Whether it be Brentford or someone else, I'm almost certain we'll see him in the Premier League soon. But a very talented player. Again, how much it would cost to get him out of Real Betis, who knows? Betis, I'm not sure they'll make Europe this season. But yeah, Johnny Cardoso is another one. But I think Lewis Ferguson would be an interesting one for Brentford. I think he'd fit well with Thomas Frank's side. So let's take a look at Fabian Hürzeler's Brighton. Brighton have just been a bit too easy to play against in the last few games. I mean, they are started really well under Hürzeler. Obviously, he won Manager of the Month early part of the season, and then it's just all started to fall away. They are winless in the last 6, conceding more than they'd like, of course. And I think a big part of that is they've just not quite got a settled back four. Injuries playing the part in that, of course. I think Estupinan's been out, Kadioglu's been out. And apart from Duncan Van Hecker, they've had to play Veltman, they've had to play Lamptey, and it's just not quite been settled. So, you can afford them that little bit, but I do think they need something extra at the back. And Brighton as a football club, incredibly well run. You might argue the best run club in the country in terms of bringing in young players, giving them a platform and affording them the ability to make mistakes, and then selling them on for massive profits. We've seen them do this time and time again. And there's a young player that I think is absolutely perfect for Brighton, perfect for the Premier League. He's been doing so well in La Liga, still only 21, can play across the back four, so would be versatile enough that you could put him anywhere. Quick, really good on the ball, can play out from the back, and a very, very high ceiling. His name's Mika Marmol. He plays for UD Las Palmas. How much you would have to pay to get him out of Las Palmas, I think you could probably snag a bargain, to be honest, whether that be, 15, 20 million quid. He's destined for the top. I'm almost certain of it. He's been playing on the left of Las Palmas recently, Las Palmas defence. They've been getting some really good results, to be honest. And he's someone that Brighton could, again, sell on in years to come. Someone like Cucurella, for example, 40, 50, 60 million quid. And Marmol is definitely in that mould. So, yeah, I think Mika Marmol would be a good one for them to look at. Okay, let's take a look at Enzo Maresca's Chelsea. Now, you might argue that the last thing Chelsea need is an extra body in January, and you'd be half right, because they're trying to get players out the door, desperately trying to get players out the door, can't fit them in the dressing room, a really, really big squad, the edges of a breach of FFP, I'm sure, unless they sell another hotel to themselves, who knows. But I definitely think Chelsea need a goalkeeper. It's not a, controversial opinion. Robert Sanchez is a steady enough goalkeeper. I think he's someone that could be a reliable backup. I think he could be someone that could be a regular, for a middling Premier League club. But he's not a title-winning goalkeeper, is he? If they've got any aspirations to win a title, they need a big game goalkeeper, someone of that elite level, someone who can come in and not only can you hang your hat on and say, yep, he's not going to, cause us any problems, he's going to be reliable, but you need someone that can pull off an occasional worldie. You need someone who is going to keep you in games. And I think there's one keeper in particular that I think fits that mould. There's very few elite goalkeepers about, actually. There's a bit of a dearth of talent of goalkeepers, I would say. Lots of very good young goalkeepers who could become elite, but not many top ones right there who, have stayed there for a while. But one I think is fitting the bill for Chelsea is Diogo Costa from Porto. How much it would cost to get him out of Porto, what do you think? Who knows? Probably 40, 50 million again you're looking at. But someone who's been really consistent at Porto for a while, has been a success there. And you'd have to say he's ready for a big move, I think. If he wants to be a top goalkeeper, he's going to have to get out of the Primera Liga. He's going to have to come to the Premier League or maybe La Liga. And he's certainly capable of going to a top Champions League side and challenging for silverware. There's been rumours linking Kevin Kelleher, for example, for Liverpool. And again, I don't think that would be an awful signing for Chelsea either. I think Kelleher's arguably underrated. But Diogo Costa's, for me, the one that you could say he's a Chelsea signing. He would go and immediately improve them. And you could see them then possibly getting back into the title reckoning. Because I think as it stands, it's looking like Chelsea might get dragged back into that top four race, they might be dragged back into that as opposed to pushing on and challenging Arsenal and Liverpool for the title this season as they hoped to. Albeit I know Maresca kind of downplayed that. They need a big game goalkeeper, and Diogo Costa definitely fits the bill. So next up, Oliver Glasner's Crystal Palace. And looking at Crystal Palace, the defence is all right. They've just signed, obviously, Lacroix's been really good. They've got Gay at the back. Chalobah's up there. Munoz is a really talented fullback. Tyrick Mitchell on the other side. The front three I really like. Mateta, Sarr, Eze. It's midfield. It's midfield that I think is the area that Palace need to look at now. They've got Adam Wharton, who for me is destined for the top. Fabulous player. Obviously, he's been injured quite a bit this season. Glasner's brought Daichi Kamada in, a player he worked with at Frankfurt and had success with, and it's not quite worked out for Kamada. And I think what Palace are missing is someone who can sit in midfield and he can pass, can do the hard yards and the running, but can also arrive late in the box and be almost like a number 10, can play just off the striker, but can contribute in a deeper position as well. And there's one player that I absolutely think is destined for the Premier League that would be a great signing for Palace, would be a fantastic signing for Palace. He's actually the top scorer in the Eredivisie at the moment. Sem Stein from 20. He's got, in the last 2 years, he's got 36 goals and assists in 50 games in the Eredivisie. For a team like 20 who aren't an Ajax, a PSV, a Feyenoord. He's done really, really well. And he's still only young. He's still only 23. So, someone that I think is tailor-made for the Premier League at some point. He's got great numbers, albeit the Eredivisie, again, what stock you put in that. We've seen players have great numbers over there, come here and flop. So, there's always that chance, of course. But we've also seen players have great numbers over there, come here and do really, really well. So, I think that would be a really interesting signing. Someone who can run from midfield, has got legs, has got energy, and is good at that sort of arriving in the box late and getting goals. And I think, Sem Stein's a really interesting one for Palace to take a look at. So next up, Sean Dyche's Everton. Now, Everton fans will all be screaming unanimously that we desperately need a winger. We need a wide player. We need someone with pace, someone that can stretch the opposition and get in behind. Get the Goodison crowd off its feet. It's exactly the sort of player that Everton have been lacking for many years. Now, Iliman Ndiaye's come in and done a really, really good job on the left-hand side. But they do need someone on the right, or maybe even someone that can play at the tip of the midfield and bring energy to the midfield and play just off the striker. They've got Lindstrom and Jack Harrison on that side, and it just hasn't quite worked out. But allegedly, Everton are really struggling in terms of being close to FFP breaches and might not have a massive amount of money to spend. Of course, they've just been taken over by the Friedkin Group, and there may well be money to spend in the summer. I don't know if that'll be available in January. So they may be looking at loans again. They may be looking at loan and sort of cheaper deals. Another factor in this is that I think Everton might be close to their limit in terms of loans. I think they've got Lindstrom, they've got Breuer, they've got Harrison, and they've got Mangala. I don't think they're allowed another loan player. One player I think they should be looking at that I think has got such a big ceiling. He's such an Everton player in terms of energy, bags of energy, can get up and down the pitch, proper box-to-box player, not just necessarily a Sean Dyche player. And that's Carney Chukwuemeka from Chelsea. I think you could get him on loan. He would be a real asset for Everton. He's a player that the fans would love, I'm sure. He's not getting any minutes at all at Chelsea. He's not getting any game time. Chelsea have made it basic public knowledge that they're happy to sell him. They want his full £40 million release clause, but no one's paying that. No one's paying 40 million quid for a player who isn't getting a kick. But it'll be really interesting to see someone, whether it be Everton or somewhere else. I think Chukwuemeka needs a platform to go and build on, because I think he's a really talented player, and Chelsea probably would be open to a loan, whether it be an option to buy or an obligation to buy after it. I think that would suit all parties, because Everton maybe would only have to pay a loan fee. And Chukwuemeka, that's the one. So let's take a look at Fulham. So Marco Silva's team are doing really well. Again, they're on the cusp of a European place. And it feels like the next logical step to push Fulham on is a midfielder. A box-to-box midfielder. They've done really well. They've got Lukic in there, who's replaced Palhinha quite well. Again, a fairly astute signing, I think. But they really lack energy, I think, in midfield. They lack someone that can pick the ball up and really carry it forward in the way that sort of Morgan Rogers has done for Villa. I'm sure, most teams would love a Morgan Rogers right now. But I think Fulham are just missing that energy. They've got Alex Iwobi, who they've been playing in a wider position lately. And I think if they could get a little bit more energy and legs and guile into that midfield, they'd become a much, much more dangerous team as a result. And one player who immediately stands out is Joe Bellingham from Sunderland. Now, Sunderland may well be a Premier League side next year, who knows? But I think he'd be tempted by a move to Fulham. To come to, obviously, to London, to a club that's on the cusp of Europe, that could well make Europe next season. Playing for Marco Silva, and I think he's producing enough now at Sunderland. He played 45 games last season. He's only 19, and he's starting regularly this season as well. He's not someone that would come in and sit on the bench at Fulham. He's someone you absolutely would come in and would be starting, and it'd be really interesting to see, can he hit the dizzy heights that that Jude is? Could Job do the same? I've watched him quite a few times this season where he's just looked different class. Still got that, he's still a little bit immature at times. He's still, a little bit rash in his decision making. But I think coming to the Premier League, he's ready for that now. He's ready for that step up. And whether he makes that with Sunderland or maybe he makes a move in January, it'll be really interesting to see. How much do you get a Jobe Bellingham for in this market? Do you pay a premium because he's Jude's brother? Who knows? I think Jobe Bellingham probably 20, 25, 30 million maybe. For a 19-year-old coming from the Championship, I would say 30 million is probably excessive. But it'd be really interesting to see him in the Premier League. Sooner rather than later, I'm sure we will. Now let's look at Kieran McKenna's Ipswich. Now, Ipswich have got problems at both ends of the pitch. However, I do think in terms of personnel, they've got Hutchinson, Delap, Smodics has been really good. I think they've got players that can hurt the opposition. In defence, they just lack a little bit of experience. They've got some really good players, really talented players at the back. Jacob Greaves I really like. I think O'Shea's been a good signing from Burnley. Tuanzebe, when he's been available, obviously background at Man United, when he's been available, he's been reliable. Leif Davis on the left hand side's been a revelation at times, and they concede really silly goals at times. The performance at home to Newcastle just really stood out to me. As I mean, Newcastle played well, but if you look at every single one of their goals, it was just schoolboy defending. It was absolute Keystone Cop stuff, and I think they just lack a little bit of organisation, a really experienced voice back there. And there's a player that is available that they could get that I think would definitely help Ipswich in the position that they're in. And that's Michael Keane from Everton. Now, Michael Keane gets a bad rap, right? He's got a bit of a reputation at Everton. He's a bit like Harry Maguire is at Man United. Just lamented by the fans at times. He's had the occasional clanger. But when he's asked to be a proper defender, a box defender, the way that Ipswich play at times, clearing crosses, really defending deep and knuckling down, he's actually really good, and Everton will attest to that. He can be relied upon to be a very good defender. It's when he's asked to do other things. It's when he's asked to, carry the ball out of defence, when he's asked to, play high or, all that sort of stuff, play those diagonals. He's not great at it. He's not a very diverse or versatile defender. But he's someone that you could bring in on a relatively low cost deal. I think his contract's up in the summer. And I think he adds to Ipswich. I think he goes in alongside Jacob Greaves at the back and just settles things down, just calms things down, just talks him through the game, and I think gives Ipswich a real base. I think he could have a bit of a renaissance, Michael Keane. You never know. He's also capable of scoring worldies. I think he scored at Ipswich, didn't he? Scored a really good goal at Ipswich. Scored the equaliser at Spurs, against Spurs at Goodison not that long ago. he's a very, very unique defender, let's say. And he's got life in the tank left, I think, at the Premier League level. So I'd really like to see Michael Keane get a move. I don't think he's going to get any minutes at Everton. I think he's fourth choice centre-back now. And Dyche has decided he's not right for him or the system that he wants to play. So it'd be interesting to see him get a move, and I think Ipswich would be a really interesting one. Now let's take a look at Leicester. Now, Leicester have got an awful defensive record. No team in the Premier League has conceded more than Leicester. And I think a big part of that is they've got two centre-backs, Connor Cody and Yannick Vestergaard, playing regularly, who very experienced pros. Very, very experienced pros. However, they've not got pace. They're not blessed with pace, and pace from attackers really troubles them. And I think that's a real problem for Leicester, because Ruud van Nistelrooy will want this Leicester side to push up, to be a little bit more aggressive and come onto the opposition. And if they can't have their centre-backs higher, if Leicester are sitting deep, then it means there's either a massive gap between Soumare, Ndidi, Skip, Winks, whoever it might be sitting in front of them. There's either a massive gap there, or they sit deeper, and then there's a massive gap to your Vardys and your attack. And that is what's happening, I think. I think we're seeing the strikers and the forward line isolated quite a bit for Leicester, because the midfield is having to be everywhere at once, because the back line just can't sit any deeper and can't press in the way that Ruud van Nistelrooy's teams have in the past. And I think a big part of that is having a pacey centre-back. Now, there's not too many top pacey centre-backs about. Certainly not that would be interested, I would argue, in joining a Leicester side that looks like it's destined for the Championship. However, I might have found one. Admittedly, I've only saw 3 or 4 games of his, but I do watch quite a bit of Ligue 1. This player has arrived from the MLS. He's a Canadian international. He's 24. He's a big lad. I think he's 6'2", 6'3", but very, very fast. He's absolute lightning. He's someone that I think could come in and be a ready-made centre-half, could slot straight in. And he's played really well for Nice. He's got bags of pace, and I think that would be a game changer for Leicester. His name's Moish Bambito. I've not mentioned him. His name's Moish Bambito. He's a Canadian international, signed from Colorado Rapids like 6 to 12 months ago. But I think you could get him for maybe 20 million quid. And Nice would see that as a good deal, having only paid 7 million quid for him not that long ago. So yeah, Moish Bambito. Watch out for him, because I think he's a name that will pop up again in future. So next up, my team, Arne Slot's Liverpool. And I think if you've got to look at one position where this season Liverpool have been vulnerable's probably a stretch. I don't think we've been vulnerable, but there's definitely room for improvement. It's at left back. Andy Robertson's a Liverpool legend. I still believe he's one of the best left backs in the Premier League, but we need to help him. Kostas Tsimikas is not going to push him. As a result, Andy Robertson is being asked to be the energizer bunny that he's always been, up and down that flank, as he's entering his 30s. And I just think we need someone else that can come in, that can push him so that he doesn't have to start every single game. I still think he can be an asset to Liverpool. I still think he will be at Liverpool for many years to come. I think there's a time now where we need to start thinking about succession planning. A player that I really like, I've already mentioned him on this video, Milos Kerkez. Now, Milos Kerkez has been a phenomenal signing for Bournemouth. Has done really, really well for him this season. Exactly the profile that you'd want to replace Andy Robertson. However, there's rumours linking him to Manchester United, which I'll come on to later, of course, because Manchester United might also be looking for a left-back. But Milos Kerkez, apparently he's a Manchester United fan. He is Hungarian, of course, and we've got Dominik Szoboszlai at Liverpool, so that might sway things in our favour. Who knows? But Milos Kerkez is one I would definitely look at. The other one, Jorel Heito from Ajax, another Ajax Academy graduate, playing regularly for Ajax. He's only 19. He's already played for Holland. Fabulous player. Really exciting. I still think he's got a big future, whether it be at Liverpool or elsewhere, and can play at centre-half as well. So versatile enough that he can move across the back line. And it'd be an interesting one, that, for Liverpool, because he wouldn't be necessarily the profile of Andy Robertson. Depends what Arne Slot's looking for, I suppose, in his new fullbacks. But yeah, I think of the two, Kerkez is the one I would go for because it's the closest like-for-like signing to Andy Robertson. Yeah, Kerkez. So next up, Manchester City, who are just on the floor at the moment, aren't they? It's so mad because you looked at Manchester City at the start of this season and you saw world beaters everywhere. Now, I'm looking across the pitch and I can't see anything, but these guys need like 8 or 9 new players. You know, De Bruyne is on about leaving this summer. You look at the attack and Jack Grealish hasn't scored or assisted for Christ knows how long. Doku and Savinho just look meh. They're certainly not Mahrez levels or Sterling levels. Bernardo Silva's looking leggy. Obviously, Rodri's got this massive injury. How's he going to come back from that? Gundogan's not looking... He looks looking a shadow of himself. City do need an awful lot. They need an awful lot, and I expect we'll see them move heavily in both January and the summer window. They need something, because if they don't get something in January, there's a chance they don't even make the Champions League next year, which would be a disaster. I think City are going to look at that midfield position. Now, Zubimendi is the obvious one, isn't it? He's rejected Liverpool. Whether or not he can be teased away from the beautiful mountains of the Basque Country, which was the reason he gave for not coming to Liverpool, who knows? But if he can't, then the player I would go for if I was Manchester City would be Tijjani Reinders from AC Milan. Wonderful player, destined for the Premier League at some point because I think AC Milan won't be able to meet his ambitions. I think he's someone that should be competing at the highest level, and I really like the look of him. The only other one I would say is maybe Ederson from Atalanta, who was linked to a lot of top teams in the summer. His form's not been quite as good this season. He's still a top player, but form's not been quite there this season. But I'm going to go Reinders. I think Reinders is the one they need to look at. So next up, Manchester United. And again, a little bit like City, they need probably 5, 6, 7 players to really compete again and get amongst the top 4, because you just look at the squad and it's bereft of quality, it's bereft of ideas. It seems they've got problems in the dressing room, of course. Some players might need to leave, whether that be, your Rashford, your Garnachos. Just doesn't seem right, does it, at that club at the moment? I think what they need, personally, I think more than anything, is based on Amorim's system where wing-backs are so important. They're desperate for a left-back. They really, really need someone on that left-hand side. They've got Mazraoui and they've got Dalot on the right-hand side. Obviously, they've been playing Amad Diallo in there with great success. And on the left-hand side, they've been playing Dalot out of position. Obviously, he's a right-sided, right-footed left wing-back. And all he's doing is cutting inside, so it's narrowing the pitch, if anything. It's not quite what Amorim wants. They really do need that natural width to sort of hug the touchline and let the rest of the team keep the shape. So I think they need someone in the mould of Aït-Nouri. Ryan Aït-Nouri from Wolves would be perfect for Manchester United. Aït-Nouri is someone that, he ends up in the box, he scores, he assists, so consistent for so long. He's still at a good age as well. I think he's only about 25, still got time and room to develop. And I think he'd be a really, really good purchase for Manchester United. A really smart, really sensible purchase. There's also rumours linking them to Milos Kerkez, and also rumours linking them to Alphonso Davies at Bayern Munich. Now, Alphonso Davies is a very Man United signing, a very star-studded signing. One where you'd look at it and go, well, why would he go to Manchester United? Liverpool have been linked with him as well. But he would be a very Man United signing. But I think Aït-Nouri's the one. I think if they get Aït-Nouri, I'd be impressed. I think he would add an awful lot to this Amorim side. I think he's the right mentality, and would push them on. Now, next up, let's take a look at Newcastle. Now, Newcastle, if they win tonight at Old Trafford, they would be 5th ahead of Manchester City and right on the tails of the Champions League places for next year. That's obviously their ambition. And if you look at the team, they've got great quality running through it. Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes in midfield. Botman, when he's back in defence, is a really, really good player. Lewis Hall started to play really well at full-back. Livramento on the other side, of course. Not forgetting Isak, Gordon up front. The one area that you would say Newcastle are lacking is in goal. They need a solid pair of hands in goal. Obviously, they've coped a lot with Dubravka covering for Nick Pope. Nick Pope's not quite his reliable self. I think he's a decent goalkeeper, Nick Pope, but I think they're desperate for a goalkeeper, and I think this January transfer window could be a really good time for them to pick up the one that I've identified, and that's Caoimhín Kelleher. Now, we talked about him earlier in terms of Chelsea. Obviously, Chelsea are being linked to Kelleher. But if you're looking for a goalkeeper who is solid, who is reliable, you would be incredibly hard pushed to find one better than Caoimhín Kelleher. Liverpool all of a sudden have 3 goalkeepers for one position. Kelleher will 100% move in January or in the summer. He is not someone I have had concerns about as a Liverpool fan. He's played regularly. Alisson's been out for months at a time, both this season and last season. Whenever Kelleher has stepped in, not only is he being reliable, he's not made, any, big clangers or anything like that. Funnily enough, the only one that I can recall was at Newcastle in the 3-3 earlier this season, where he let it go. But other than that, the guy's been absolutely incredible. Saved a penalty against Real Madrid. He kept clean sheets against Manchester City. He led Liverpool. He was in between the sticks for Liverpool last season for large periods when Liverpool were, going far in the Champions League, going far in the Premier League title race. And again, this season, he's played an awful lot. He was our penalty shootout hero in a number of cup finals that we've won. I just think he's destined to play for a really big side, whether it be in the Premier League or elsewhere. I'm sure he would prefer to stay in the Premier League. Apparently a really good guy to have around the dressing room as well. Humble, down to earth, international for the Republic of Ireland, of course, as another Newcastle legend was, Shay Given. So I think Kelleher would be one the Newcastle fans would take to. I really do. I think he'd be a great signing. You could probably get him for, what's the going rate for a top keeper now? I think maybe 30 million you could probably get him for, given that Liverpool are looking to move on and get a different type of player. And he's surplus to requirements, which sounds disrespectful. But, Jurgen Klopp said it. Kelleher is behind what many would say is the best number one, the best goalkeeper in the world, Alisson Becker. And I firmly believe that Kelleher is the best number 2 in the world. So, no disrespect at all. He would go with Liverpool fans' blessing. And I think he'll go on and be a top keeper somewhere else. And why not Newcastle? So next up, let's look at high-flying Nottingham Forest. What can they do to secure a Champions League spot in January? Well, I've got to be honest with you, I think there's one glaring area of the pitch that they desperately need reinforcements for. You look at the squad again, Murillo, Milenkovic at the back. They're reliable. They've got a very good base in defence. Midfield, Gibbs White. They've got Elanga on the wings, Hudson-Odoi. Ryan Yates has done really well in midfield as well. I don't think they're necessarily short in midfield, but they've got Chris Wood in attack. And if Chris Wood gets injured, at 33 years old as well, by the way, if Chris Wood gets injured, the whole season is done as far as I'm concerned. They've got Taiwo Awoniyi, an ex-Liverpool youngster. He's not really done enough at Forest. I think he's destined to leave. They've got Emmanuel Dennis, who doesn't get in the squad these days. And they can play maybe Jota Silva there as well, but again, he's not a centre forward. Certainly not in the style that Nottingham Forest play. So the question now is to be asked is how ambitious are Nottingham Forest? Just how ambitious are these owners? Would they be willing to throw 30, 40 million to go out there and get a striker, to go out there and get someone that can compete with Chris Wood? Obviously, they're only going to play with one centre forward. So Chris Wood would still get an awful lot of game time. But I think they could go out there. There's an opportunity for them to go out there and get a really, really good, high quality centre forward that could push them on. And all of a sudden, you would say, right, they are candidates certainly for the Europa League, which would still be a phenomenal season, by the way. If they got the Europa League, you'd still say, wow, that's a great season. But if they get the right striker, they could go and get the Champions League, that last Champions League position. Because let's say Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool are taken, and there's only really one left. And the player that I think they could go for is one that is being linked to lots and lots of top teams. He's actually being linked to Liverpool as well. It's Omar Marmoush from Eintracht Frankfurt. What a player. Scoring hatfuls of goals. his numbers are terrific, and I think if he comes in, it adds a total new dimension to this Nottingham Forest side. Now, some might say that might be a little bit too ambitious for Nottingham Forest, but is it? Is it? Eintracht Frankfurt are a side that probably aren't going to be in the Champions League next season. Nottingham Forest could well be in the Champions League next season, and the Premier League is always going to be bigger than the Bundesliga. So I think he might be tempted. And how much would it take to get Omar Marmoush to Nottingham Forest? 50, 60 million? Could Forest, could they move some players out to try and make that a little bit less, less painful? I don't know, but there's a couple of players that just stood out to me straight away. And the first one was Marmoush. Because it would be like a wow factor. This guy has got 38 goals and assists in 44 games over the last 18 months for Eintracht Frankfurt. He's just insane. We're talking Mohamed Salah levels of consistency. Obviously, he's an Egyptian as well. And we know how well they do in the Premier League. So I just think he would be a great acquisition for Forest. I'd love to see it. It's whether or not they could afford it and get it done. But why not? The only other one that I would look at, and it's also from the Bundesliga, funnily enough, is if you look at the Bundesliga top scorers, you've got Harry Kane at the top, then it's Omar Marmoush, and then it's Jonathan Burkardt. Now, Burkardt is playing for Mainz. Mainz are doing really well, having a very good season. They're currently sat in the Europa League places, I believe, in the Bundesliga. And yeah, he's third top scorer in the Bundesliga. He's been very consistent over the last couple of years for Mainz. Still only 24, just been called up to the German national squad. I think he's got 21 goals and assists in 35 games, so good numbers. He's a little bit more in the Chris Wood mould, and I think he could lead the line and be that sort of single centre forward for Mainz. If they couldn't get Marmoush and they got Burkardt, I'd still say that'd be a terrific signing. You could probably get Burkardt for probably a third of what Marmoush is available for, as there's an awful lot of big teams sniffing round him. But listen, Burkardt's one to watch for the future. As I say, he's got a couple of caps for Germany, still only 24, still young, very clever player, good centre forward, and I think he'd do really well for Forest as well. So next up, Southampton, and Ivan Juric has just come into Southampton. He's just trying to get to grips with the team, isn't he, and trying to make them a little bit more resilient, a little bit more resolute, and hard to beat. But I think the thing that Saints are lacking most is goals. They're desperate for goals. Cameron Archer is still a young player. He has got room for development, but I don't think he's a Premier League striker just yet. And Onuachu, again, he can hold the ball up. He's probably someone that would be good off the bench, to hold the ball up and bring others into play and that sort of thing. But he's not a goal scorer. He's not going to be someone that is going to keep Saints up. They need more at the top end of the pitch. And there's a couple of players that I think that they should be looking at. Now, the first one is a little bit left field, right? So the first one is not getting game time, is already at another Premier League club, right? Already at another Premier League club, got a reputation for scoring goals and has played at the highest level in the Champions League. Any guesses? Nicholas Füllkrug. Nicholas Füllkrug hasn't barely played for West Ham. When he has played, he's done okay, but he's not a Lopetegui player at all. He's not getting any game time. Even with Antonio in the car accident and everything that's happened, Antonio out the side, he's still not getting minutes. Lopetegui's choosing to play Bowen up front as a centre forward. So it's just not working out for Füllkrug there. Füllkrug had a great season at Dortmund. I actually thought when he came to West Ham that it'd be a really shrewd signing for him. But it just hasn't turned out to be the case. And I'm sure he would be, at his age, he's desperate to get some minutes. And I think Southampton could probably seize on that one and say, we could get a top centre forward here for probably on loan or maybe for very, very little, and get him in. I think they could. I think they could go and get Füllkrug. I don't think West Ham would be too forced. I actually think West Ham will probably need a centre forward themselves, a slightly different one. But Füllkrug, I think, would be a really astute one for Southampton, even if it's only a short-term sort of loan deal. So let's take a look at Spurs. Now, if rumours are to be believed, then Ange Postecoglou might not be the Spurs manager in the next few weeks. So it's difficult to say what they need right now or who they'll get, because the whole strategy might change when a new manager comes in. But I would say, personally, from where they are now, whether it's Ange Postecoglou or another manager, one thing they desperately need is legs, energy and creativity in those wide forward positions. Spurs haven't struggled to score goals this season, but Son can't go on forever. It hasn't worked out with Richarlison, whether that be through the middle or if they've pushed him out wide. Brennan Johnson, for the money they paid, probably not got great value. He's still a young lad, lots to develop in, so he could kick on. And Wilson Odobert, again, a talented young player, but injured quite a bit this season. So they need someone to come in that's going to support Solanke and allow Kulusevski to play in his, let's say, his more natural position. And the player that I've picked out is a player that's played in the Premier League before, funnily enough, that's had a burgeoning reputation outside of the Premier League. It's Ademola Lookman. Scored a hat-trick in the Europa League final, of course. A fantastic player for Atalanta. Has done really, really well since going to Italy, and it's odd how you've seen these players have like a renaissance away from the Premier League, when it wasn't that long ago that Lookman couldn't get in the Leicester side, couldn't get in the Everton side, and his career was kind of stalling, and then all of a sudden he's gone to Italy and he just looks a world beater. He's getting links with Arsenal, but I think he would be tempted by a move back to the Premier League. I really do. I think he'd be tempted to come back to prove that he's got the ability, and to show that he has got the ability. We know he's got the ability, but to show that he can do it at the highest level in the best league in the world. And I think Tottenham would be a great place for him to do that. Tottenham really like playing that style of that high energy, that counter-attacking football under Postecoglou, and whoever the replacement might be. Rumours about Edin Terzic. Whoever the replacement might be, I'm sure they would play in a similar way. Tottenham have always played that style of football, apart from 1 or 2 years under Mourinho. But yeah, I think Lookman to Tottenham would make a lot of sense. I think that would be a really good signing for them. How much would you get Lookman for in this market? Again, you're probably looking at 40, 50 million plus, aren't you? He's a good quality player at Atalanta, and he's having success out there. So that would be my take. It would be Lookman to Spurs. So next up, Julen Lopetegui's West Ham. They need a striker, don't they? They need a striker. I watched them last night against Liverpool. And, Kudus took up that centre-forward role sometimes. Sometimes it was Bowen. But neither of those are strikers. They need someone who'll lead the line for them. Not just lead the line, but can run the channels as well, can create space for others, can bring others into play. And there's lots of... There is a good market for that at the moment. Since Antonio did a great job for West Ham in that position, the top scorer, isn't he? But God knows how long it'll be before he gets back to playing for West Ham. Hopefully he does, and it's not too long. There's a few players, I think, out there that would be a really, really good addition for West Ham. Earlier in this video, we talked about Forest going out and targeting someone like Marmoush, right? I don't think Marmoush goes to a West Ham. I think he might go to a Forest. He might go to a Forest with the position they're in. I don't think he goes to a West Ham. But I just think that what we're actually talking about here is strikers who are on the cusp of becoming top strikers, let's say. Not quite delivering those elite numbers, but young strikers who could come in and do a really, really good job for West Ham. And these are the ones that I've picked out. The first one, who I really, really like this player at the European Championships, and I really liked him when I've watched him in Liga, and he's only played, this is his first season in Liga. George Mikotadze. He's a Georgian striker. He scored at the European Championships. He came from Metz in the second division in France, where he did really, really well. He got a move to Ajax and immediately moved to Lyon, where he's done really, really well. So I think Mikotadze would be an interesting one for West Ham to look at. However, the main one that I want to talk about is Tierno Barry. Okay, Tierno Barry at Villarreal. He's 6'5", absolute monster, but so quick on the ball. great reputation coming through at, I think it was Beveren in Belgium, and then went to Bâle in Switzerland, carried on scoring at a good rate there. He's still only 22, still a young lad, and he's gone to Villarreal, and he's still scoring at that 1-in-2 rate. Saw him score a hat-trick the other day against Leganés for Villarreal. Saw him have a great game against Girona, where he scored not long before that. He's absolutely going to play at a higher level. I'm telling you, he's someone that West Ham would be getting him before the top teams come calling for him in another 12 to 18 months' time. I'm certain of it. I'm absolutely certain of it. Calling it now. Tierno Barry at Villarreal. And the only other one that I was going to mention that West Ham and maybe some other teams might take a gamble on is Mika Biereth from Sturm Graz. Now, again, remember the name. He's 21. He came through the Fulham Academy. He was born in London, came through the Fulham Academy. I think he signed for Arsenal and then has gone from Arsenal to... he's gone out on loan a couple of times, but he's gone to Sturm Graz, moved officially, formally to Sturm Graz, and just been sensational. Still only 21, but scoring at a ridiculous rate, and scoring regularly in the Champions League as well, for what it's worth. He scored against Lille, he scored against Girona for Sturm Graz. He can score at the highest level, and again, he's one of those players that we saw Haaland in playing for Molde. We saw Haaland playing in Austria for Salzburg, and there was always those rumours about, do you know what, could he make it? Could he make it? Now, I'm not saying Biereth will reach the heights, the dizzy heights of Haaland, of course, but we look at these players when we see them performing in a league that perhaps doesn't get the attention that the other big five do, and we see them and we think, well, could they do that step up? Well, until you take a chance, you just never know. And I think Mika Biereth is someone he's been in England before. He's been settled in England before. He knows, London well, Fulham and Arsenal. I think he could come back to West Ham, be relatively settled, and could slot straight in. And it'd be a fairly cheap one, that. From Sturm Graz, you'd probably be looking at, 15 million quid, there or thereabouts, for a young centre-forward that's scoring lots and lots of goals. That, to me, is a gamble worth taking, especially if you're talking about selling him for 3-4 times that figure in a few years' time. But yeah, he's kind of one from left field. I've seen it do bits, mainly in the Champions League, but I've seen his numbers look incredible in the Austrian League, of course. But the main one, as I say, that I've watched quite a bit of La Liga, and for Villarreal, Tierno Barry, 6'5", just can do all types of systems. I think you could play the ball into him, he could hold it up, he's a big strong lad, but he can also go in behind, you can knock it over the top to him as well, and a really good finisher. As I say, hat-trick against Leganés the other day, top performance. And he's one that I think the big boys will come calling for soon, no doubt. So West Ham, if you're looking for a centre forward, get in there before strike while the iron's hot, sort of thing. Get there before someone else does. And Tierno Barry would be one. And lastly, Wolves. Now, Wolves, again, it's obvious. Wolves will be screaming this one. Centre back, desperate for some defensive reinforcements. And I think the one player that stood out immediately to me when I was thinking about this, when I was doing this video, the first thought I had, because they're playing at the moment with Craig Dawson at the back for Wolves, and Craig Dawson must be 34, 35, if not older than that. I'm not sure. He's not got great legs or anything like that. They have other players around him in Wolves' system that Gary O'Neill played, and Vitor Pereira plays a very similar system. But there's one player that I think will be available very soon, that I think would slot in, that would do the sort of job that Craig Dawson's doing, but to a much higher level, that is desperate for a chance as well, that has got something to prove, has got a point to prove. Any guesses? Any guesses at all? You're going to say I'm crazy. Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire to Wolves, right? I know he's on big money, right? He's on big money. His contract's running out soon. He's on big cash, right? But he's someone that I think Man United would be willing to let go. He's a great leader in the dressing room by all accounts, and should be Man United's captain, I think. He's desperate to prove himself. He has got a lot of flack at Man United. A lot of it is uncalled for. I think Harry Maguire's a top defender. He's made the occasional flap and the occasional error. Again, a bit like Michael Keane, he's being asked to play systems that he's perhaps not used to. When he was at Leicester, he was a terrific box defender, winning the header, dominating in the air, defending the box, really, really good player at that. But when you're asking him to come out and be that ball-playing centre-half, and it's not really his game. Running back to his own goal, all that sort of stuff, it's not really Harry Maguire. And I think he'd do more of the former at Wolves than he would the latter. So I think he would thrive at Wolves. I really think he would. I think that's the sort of place where he could go and go, they're not in any danger of going down, so it's not like a big career step down. Let's be honest, if he leaves Man United, which he will in the next 6 to 12 months, where's he going? Where's Harry Maguire going? He's going to stay in England, but where's he going? I can't see him playing for a team like a Spurs or a Newcastle or someone who's chasing the European places. I just don't think he would go to those. Well, I don't think those teams would want him. I think those teams are going to target younger centre-halves with bigger future, whereas I think Harry Maguire is probably better suited to a Wolves or maybe a West Ham. He was linked to West Ham, wasn't he? Someone like that where they're perhaps not going to always trouble the European places, but might with the right set of circumstance. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see them move for a Harry Maguire type, an astute centre back that can help them be a bit more organised at the back, because that's what they're lacking, isn't it? That's what they're lacking. They've not quite got it together at the back, and they're conceding far too many goals. I believe is it the worst in the division alongside Leicester. Nobody has conceded more than Wolves in the league this season. So yeah, they're getting hidings far too often. I think Harry Maguire would put a stop to that. Harry Maguire, it's a bit of a strange one from left field, but I think they need a centre back. Harry Maguire would be a good one, whether it be on loan or a cheaper deal. I don't think they'd turn their nose up to that. What do you think, Wolves fans? Would you turn your nose up to Harry Maguire? And that's it. What do you think? What does your team need? What are you looking for in the January transfer window? Do you agree with me? Do you think that Liverpool are desperate for a left back? Do you think Wolves are desperate for a centre back? Did I get the players right? What do you think of those players? Do you think the valuations were right? Let me know. Put it in the comments. Either way, thanks for watching. Massively appreciate it, as always. And if you like this sort of stuff, if you like this sort of content, give us a follow, give us a like. I'll be posting videos every single day going forward. And yeah, I like talking football. I'm a bit of a nerd. See you on the next one.